off. Okay. So in the spirit of our session tonight, everyone's view is important. Please feel free to say what you think, and there's no right or wrong answer through the evening. And we just want to share our ideas after we speak to Laura. So I take great pleasure in inviting our guest speaker tonight, Laura Price, CEO of Oxfordshire Community and Voluntary Action. So Laura, over to you.
Thank you. And I love your little thing at the start about what the spirit of the meeting is as well. I think I might start stealing that for meetings. I think it's a really good way to open up a session, because we do so many of these kind of networks now, and I think it's a really good way to make people realize what the context of some of these discussions are. So I have got a few slides that I've put together just to kind of like guide me through, but I promise that I won't stick really rigid to them, and hopefully it will be quite conversational. And I will invite people to contribute a little bit as well. And if people feel more comfortable putting some things in the chat rather than saying them out loud, then feel free to do that as well. And there should be plenty of time for people to come back with questions and things at the end. So I'm Laura Price, and I'm Chief Exec of an organisation called Oxfordshire Community and Voluntary Action, which, as you might have guessed, is based in Oxfordshire. And Chief Exec, I always think, is quite a grand title for a very small organisation, because we're a team of 5 people really. We've got a couple of part-time project-based people working with us at the moment, but we work across Oxfordshire, really being the charity for the charity and community sector. So we're there really to provide information, training, advice and support to people who want to do not-for-profit and community-based activity in Oxfordshire. And we also have a volunteer service. So we help organisations who are looking for volunteers to find volunteers, and we help people who are looking for a volunteering opportunity to find the right volunteering opportunity for them. So that's a bit about the organisation that I work for. And I've been in that post since November 2020. So I took up that post right in the middle of the pandemic. So it was really strange to go into a job that's all about meeting people and organisations and getting out into communities when I was stuck behind a computer screen, trying to kind of do that in this way. So it's been a really strange 2 years, but gladly I can get out and about more. And so I'm starting to meet a lot of organisations now face to face that I've only been able to deal with virtually for a long time. So as you might be able to hear from my accent, I am originally from Doncaster in South Yorkshire, but I've lived in Oxfordshire since 2003. So I think I've managed to kind of win some credibility with the folk of Oxfordshire. And before I took up the role at OCVA, I'd served 8 years as a county councillor, which had given me a lot of insight into local authorities, statutory services, and really the relationship that a local authority, just go back to the other side, the relationship that a local authority can have with the community and voluntary sector and charities. And I suppose maybe how I felt like some things could be done differently or better. And I suppose the last thing that I should say is that I love cooperatives. I'm very passionate about cooperative models. I was a cooperative councillor, and I always look to find cooperative solutions to lots of things, really, and I kind of hold cooperation as an important value in everything that I do. So I'm always happy to talk about what cooperatives are and what they mean and why they're important to anybody really who's interested in listening. So if we go on to the next slide, a little bit about kind of some of my own personal experiences of volunteering. I said that I'd been a county councillor for 8 years, but also one of the other things that really kind of drove me to want to take on the role at OCVA was that I also set up and then ran, but as an unpaid volunteer, a cooperative model community bus service in West Oxfordshire called West Oxfordshire Community Transport. So it was a community benefit society, but a cooperative community benefit society, and we founded it in 2016. And the first picture there on the screen is me with a few of the passengers with the first bus that we procured, getting ready to kind of go on one of its early routes. And then the second picture is one of our more modern fleet of buses. And so now the service is a larger fleet of much more modern buses, and West Oxfordshire Community Transport operate 6 routes around West Oxfordshire. And, you know, I sort of went from being interested in trying to preserve local services that were being cut because of local government funding cuts that were happening because of national government funding cuts, trying to use a cooperative model to get communities to be invested and have some say over how they were going to have an ongoing stake in their local bus services that they were so invested in, and have that ongoing relationship with them. And from that, I ended up being the director of a bus company and learning more about bus legislation than I ever thought I would over the kind of 4 years that I was the director of that. And I think it's fascinating that doing something like that in a voluntary capacity, it's quite an extreme example because, you know, it did end up being kind of quite a huge thing, but it gave me so many amazing experiences, not only, you know, the highs of being able to kind of see that route being saved, seeing the routes grow, seeing the sort of satisfaction of knowing that that route was there and secure, and seeing those passengers using it and knowing that we've done that in our community. But, you know, some exciting things as well, like, you know, going and lobbying MPs in Parliament about changes to bus legislation and all those sorts of things. Some really exciting experiences that effectively came from like voluntary community action. And you know, it sort of came from nowhere, really. It just came from being passionate about something in the community, getting involved, learning about it, getting together with like-minded people to solve a problem. And, you know, that is one aspect of what volunteering can do. And so that's kind of one of the ways in which volunteering had a really big impact on my life. But before we move on to the next slide, I did just want to ask how many people on this call do volunteer. And when I say volunteer, it doesn't have to be like, do you regularly volunteer every week, but how many people like volunteer? So do you want to like raise a hand, like an actual physical hand, or say something in the chat, or so I can see lots of hands going up. And if you don't volunteer, would you be able to pop in the chat, or if you feel brave, just turn your microphone on and say, what has been the thing that stopped you Has anybody got anything? Or even if you do volunteer, but maybe there was a time when you nearly volunteered for something but didn't, what was the thing that stopped you? They've got lots of people talking. I can imagine that everybody on this call are probably very community focused people that are really proactive and do loads of amazing things all the time. But has anybody ever experienced a kind of reason or a barrier? No. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. Have a think about it, and if anything pops up, then stick it in the chat. Some people don't know what it is and think it's a regular commitment. Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit more. And being scared about being bad at something, definitely. Right, okay. So and COVID as well. So if we hop on, and Lynette, and you didn't know about whether your skills would be a match. Yeah, so we'll touch on some of those things a little bit later on. So just hopping on to the next slide. Oh, I'm just gonna look at what Barbara said. Getting burnt out after 3 years. Yeah, right. I'm gonna bank that, because like my last slide, there's a little bit about that. So I think it's really interesting, those comments about some of the barriers and some of the issues. So I think the thing to remember about volunteering is that everybody in their comments there have given really diverse comments about the different reasons why something might not have worked for them. And I'm sure that the examples of the ways that you volunteer are all quite different as well. And I just talked then about my experience of setting up the bus co-op and my experience of volunteering from that perspective. But actually, I've got other examples of volunteering that I've done and that I'm involved with, and even now that I've stepped down from doing the bus co-op stuff, because actually, similarly, after doing that for 4 years in a really intense way, and then taking on a new job, and also having other life things going on. My dad had Parkinson's and sadly passed away in 2021. But as his illness was progressing, it was trying to balance some of those like caring responsibilities and life things. They're all the things that people are dealing with at the same time as wanting to enjoy volunteering and contributing. And I think that's going to be something that organizations need to be aware of when they're looking at somebody volunteering. But I thought to myself, there's still lots of ways that I can contribute. I don't have to be going 100 miles an hour at something and being the director of an organisation. So it doesn't always have to be a regular commitment. There's lots of opportunities out there that organisations are going to be grateful of. So it's always worth just keeping an eye out for opportunities like that. Litter picks are always a great way to get involved. Tree planting, community orchards. Increasingly, a lot of communities are doing things around community orchards, and we've got a mini forest, a tiny forest in Witney, where we've got opportunities for people to kind of go up and look after that mini forest, and also do some volunteer science sampling around that. So there's a rather attractive picture of my bum there, where we're raking some grass around the edge of a municipal field, where we persuaded the town council to let us plant yellow rattle seed that has like real environmental benefits, because the yellow rattle kind of takes hold in the roots of the grass and it opens up the grass to allow more diverse plants to be able to grow. So you get to learn lots of things like that if you can get involved in things like that. And, you know, I don't, Whitney Land Army, that's a local organisation where I don't have to go and volunteer with them week in, week out. But you can pick up activities like that and do it on an ad hoc basis. And it's also really good. I can take my son along to that as well. And so it's good for finding variety for different age groups as well. I think with volunteering as well, don't be afraid to try something out. And if it's not for you, walk away from it. I think that, you know, people worry that they might offend somebody if they go and do something and they don't like it, or, you know, what if I go and then I have to keep going. But I think, you know, it's the whole thing about volunteering is that it is voluntary on both sides. So you don't have to carry on doing something. Just make sure that you're doing something because you enjoy doing something and you're getting something rewarding out of it. So don't carry on doing something if you're not enjoying it. So think about what rewards and nourishes you and what leaves you feeling energized, because volunteering you know, isn't an act of pure altruism. I know that people talk about volunteering as like doing good, but I think ultimately it has to leave you feeling good as well, and it shouldn't be something that leaves you feeling drained and exhausted. It's got to be something that does leave you with a full tank. And I think if you are left in your role feeling like you haven't got a full tank, then it's not the right role for you, and there's something not right about it. So you need to kind of reassess what your relationship is with that volunteering role if you're kind of coming away from a volunteering role feeling really negative about it. So next slide. So I think we probably understand that you know, we can give money to charities and organisations and it's very welcome, but giving time to a charity is possibly more valuable than you know, any donation that we can give, because being able to give your time to support their service delivery is so impactful. So many charities and community groups and organisations can only operate on very skeletal staff. If I think of examples in Oxfordshire of really impactful charities, I'm thinking in particular of Arch, who are a school reading scheme charity. They only have, I think, 3 paid members of staff, but they cover the whole of Oxfordshire with in-school reading volunteers. And there's no way that they'd be able to employ people to go and deliver that level of service to support people. It has to be something, a network that's supported by volunteers, and the impact that they're having on children's lives is huge. And you wouldn't be able to ever match that level of impact on children's lives by donating money. So being able to say, you know, I can go and give some time to be able to get the training and then make that contribution in a community to spend that time reading with a child is massive. And so I think just knowing how valuable you are to the aims and values of that organisation, if that matches with what your values are, is just really important. And then I think the other thing to remember is that you might have a specialist skill. So I think, you know, I know someone said like that in terms of barriers, you might worry that you're not the right skills match. But one of the important things to consider is, you know, about the positive side of your skills match. So think about what your skills are, maybe don't just think about your skills yourself independently. Get someone else to think about your skills, because I think a lot of us undersell our skills. So maybe don't do your skills audit yourself. Talking to the women in the room here quite a lot, because I think we're probably the worst culprits for underselling our skills. But get like a friend, or somebody that you've maybe worked with previously, to say, what do you think my skill sets are, and then think about what they might match to. And I'm obviously in Oxfordshire, so we've got a list of organisations that are looking for trustees, and we match people against that trustees list. So if they're specifically looking for either someone with finance, or someone with marketing or communications or HR, or facilities, something like that, then we can match that against that. But wherever you are, there will be an organisation along the lines of OCVA in your area, so it's worth familiarising yourself with that organisation if you haven't already, and having a chat with them about what you've got to give from that perspective, because trustees, that is a form of volunteering as well. You're doing it for free, and it's also really, really, really important role for charities and their governance and their ability to function well. So have a think about that as well. And I think definitely get some outside perspective on what your skills are, so that you're not just appraising it yourself and selling yourself short. Right, next slide. And then I think, if coming at it more from the angle of anybody who might be on the call from an organisation that's looking for volunteers, or thinking about how to keep volunteers, the sort of, is anybody on the call from an organisation that's looking for volunteers at the moment? What sort of, oh, I can see one hand going up. Lynette. Yeah. Lynette, what organisation are you from? Do you mind saying?
No, not at all. I'm interim fundraising consultant for Daybreak, which is a dementia charity.
Oh, right. And are you Daybreak? Because we've got a Daybreak in Oxfordshire. Are you from Oxfordshire, Daybreak?
That's right. Yes.
Oh, right.
The
Okay.
3 centres there. Yeah.
Yeah. And how are you finding things at the moment?
Well, I've been brought in to assist the chief exec to put together a volunteer programme. So we're just starting it, actually. I've only been doing it for a couple of weeks.
Yeah. So I think, there's lots of like, nationally, there's been lots of sort of studies going on, trying to kind of find out what the sort of impact of COVID has been on trends in volunteering. And I don't know if like the dust has fully settled yet. In Oxfordshire, we've been doing a survey on people's experiences of volunteering, and the survey's just closed, actually, so we're just analysing some of that data at the moment, but we're following that up with some one-to-ones with people that have indicated that they're happy to have some more in-depth interviews about their experiences of volunteering. But largely what we're seeing is similar to what the national picture seems to be feeding back, is that there's been, broadly speaking, a reduction in people who are volunteering on a regular basis. So there has been a drop in the number of people that are attending, regular volunteering sessions. Now, I suppose we don't know how rapidly that will recover, because the impact of that was obviously because so many services did have to mothball their services because of COVID restrictions, and then a lot of people that were able to offer their time did offer their time at a really high intense level to informal volunteering, whether that was shopping for a neighbour completely independent of any organisation, or whether it was, you know, joining up with local mutual aid groups. So I don't want to paint a negative picture, because I think, you know, there's been a huge amount of activity going on, but I think for a lot of organisations that are reliant on volunteers and are delivering services, it's a really tough environment. And I think that the other issue that I think is really coming to the fore is that organisations that deliver services, you know, like advice services, volunteer driver services, you know, it'd be interesting to hear about the experiences of Daybreak being a kind of, you know, day service for older people, but particularly with things like advice services that have seen a really massive spike in demand. They have not been able to meet that rise in demand with volunteers. They haven't been able to recruit volunteers to that level. They've really struggled to meet that demand. I think somebody's mentioned about not getting funding. Yeah, not getting funding, you know, to be able to kind of meet that increase in demand. And so we have seen particularly those sorts of charities and organisations having a particularly difficult time, and I think that they're the areas that, you know, that I'm particularly worried about, really, and that I think that if people do have availability to be able to volunteer, and it does match their values and they have got the capabilities to do it, then, you know, I think, you know, go and make contact with your local advice centre, you know, your local driver service, day services, things like that, because they are experiencing such significant pressures at the moment, and they really do carry a lot on behalf of like statutory services, but they don't get the funding. And so I think, you know, that they are an area that I think we have like real worries about. So yeah, I think, you know, we're sort of in Oxfordshire kind of interested to see what comes out of our more local survey stuff. But I think there's a lot of activity, and there's a lot of really positive, interesting stuff happening. But there's also some really significant challenges there as well. So I think in terms of finding volunteers, I think, you know, just making sure, like with any communications, that you don't stick to just one channel, that you remember to keep your channels of communication broad. So social media is great, but it's not the answer to everything. If you use social media to the exclusion of remembering that traditional forms of media exist, then you're going to exclude a certain audience. So don't forget that parish notice boards are still really effective for some communities. Don't forget that informal coffee mornings and places like that can be a really great way to pick people up who maybe are looking for opportunities to make human connection. And so actually then not only are you going to fill a volunteer post, but you're also going to be creating that human connection that's going to have a really positive impact on that person's life as well. So you're keeping that true spirit of what volunteering is all about going. I think with volunteering, it's always important to challenge yourself about whether you're thinking beyond the usual suspects. Think, you know, we know that a lot of volunteers do tend to be older. That is kind of challenging because that older volunteer workforce increasingly have a lot of pressures on their own life. They're increasingly having to, you know, be the childcare, you know, take on other responsibilities as well. I think if we're going to have a big sustainable pool of people volunteering, then we have to keep looking at how we make volunteering broad and accessible to as many people as possible. And at OCVA, we're currently working on a project in partnership with Bullingdon Prison, where we're looking at how to make sure that prisoners coming out of Bullingdon have the opportunity to form more enduring relationships with their community on release, so that they can actually have opportunities to volunteer as well. So I think it's just thinking about, you know, how you make sure that volunteering is something that's accessible to everybody. Again, making communications accessible, so looking at making sure that you've got language options available, that you're considering disabilities, that you're thinking about that in your social media, in any of your print material as well. And then just again, going back to the thing about speaking to people's values, I think people are willing to give their time when you touch on something that resonates with them. And on the surface of it, you don't know what is going on in somebody's life, what their experience has been, what it is that's going to resonate with them. So make sure that as a charity or a community group or an organisation, that you're really clear about what your mission is and what your values are, so that somebody else can pick up on that if it is going to resonate with them, because that is the thing that ultimately is going to drive them to want to connect with you. So make sure that you know how to articulate that. And then once you've got your volunteer, to keep them, I think it's about having a good induction process. And that doesn't mean that you have to do lots of complicated stuff. So keep it as simple as possible, have a volunteer agreement in place, some clear information about safeguarding, your policies, who the key contacts in your organisation are, and have a plan about what to do when things go wrong. Because unfortunately, sometimes things don't work out with a volunteer. And I think that so that your own organisation can be protected from any reputational damage, but also so that the volunteer can exit without any discomfort or as little discomfort as possible, having an agreement in place and having a way that you can manage that process when things don't work out is really important. And then keep in touch. People are keeping in touch with volunteers in all sorts of different ways these days. Sometimes, you know, it's just the traditional kind of regular ring around. Other organisations are making really effective use of WhatsApp groups. Oxford Mutual Aid in Oxfordshire really heavily rely on their WhatsApp groups, and I hear great things about how they keep in touch with their volunteer networks through WhatsApp groups. So that's kind of one really effective way of doing it. But for lots of organisations, it is still having a volunteer coordinator that just makes sure that if they haven't had contact with a volunteer for a while, that they have them on a list to do a ring around, check in with them. And that can be a check-in with a volunteer who is regularly volunteering to see how that regular volunteering is going. Or it might be, say you've got someone on your, say you're a volunteer driver service and you've got someone registered with you as a volunteer driver and they haven't been booked against a job for a month or so, you might need to have a note to phone them just to kind of retain their interest and keep them on your books in that sort of way. So it's about keeping in touch with them if they are actively doing stuff, but it's also about keeping in touch with them even if they're not actively doing something, to kind of see if there's something else that they might be able to do, because you don't want to lose them from your organisation. I think it's really valuable to try and have some other get-togethers so that they have a broader understanding of your organisation. So if you're a charity like, say, Home Start, who run one-to-one support for parents of children under 5, but also run playgroups, then you might want to make sure that you are providing an opportunity for the volunteers who are running the playgroups, but also the people that are quite often working a bit more in isolation and going and doing the peer one-to-one support, to be able to all get together regularly. So you're bringing people from different areas of your charity together to feel like they're all part of the same cause. And again, that links back to the idea about values. And then, even though it's a job, it's not a job, it's a volunteering opportunity, people might still want a sense of progression. So that check-in, is an opportunity to talk to people about whether there is a sense of progress that they're looking for, and if they're happy in the role that they're volunteering in, or if they want to change things up a little bit, and if they want to volunteer in a different way, or if they want to do something a little bit different, because you don't want them to get bored and look at going and volunteering at a different organisation instead, or give up and go somewhere else. And you can keep volunteers happy and engaged for a very long time. So Volunteers Week this year, we gave an award to Ken from an organisation called Volunteer Link Up. Hi. Who has been volunteering with that organisation since 1985. So they've obviously kept him engaged and happy and volunteering very well. So I think that's my last bit on the slides, really. So I just wanted to make sure that there was plenty of time really for people to be able to have a bit of a chat and ask any questions.
Anyone got any questions for Laura at all? Yes,
Is that
Jo.
Joanne's hand?
Hello, Laura. It's Jo from Forget Me Not in Bicester here. Can you hear
Hi,
me?
Jo. Yes,
Hello
I can.
there.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask you, you mentioned with your last slide about what to do when things go wrong with volunteers. And we're really fortunate with the vast majority of the volunteers we've got. They're great and they've been with us a long time, and we get new volunteers and they settle in really nicely. But recently we have had somebody who we've had to sort of very kindly let go. And he was an older gentleman, and generally they're females, so it's really good to have a gentleman, because obviously we have gentlemen elderly clients, and it's good, they like to talk about the football and those kind of things. But this particular gentleman became quite fond of swearing and other inappropriate language. So my colleague had a very nice, quiet one-to-one word with him, just a gentle chat one day before he started. And his reaction wasn't, "Oh, I'm really sorry," but it was, "Well, they're all adults, they're all grown-ups, and surely they all swear," and he didn't really get it at all. So she tried to explain, and he went into the session, and then the next session he brought in a rather inappropriate poem. I don't mean desperately inappropriate, but we felt it wasn't appropriate. So again, my colleague discussed, but that time we had 2 colleagues together who tried to explain. And in the end, the next session he came to, he said, "Well, clearly, you know, I'm getting a lot out of this, but maybe it's not the right place for me. So it was okay. We were really worried, you know, as to how this was going to go and what really to do. And I've had occasion to speak to I can't remember the name of one of the ladies that run Arch in Bicester, but we were at the Bicester Village presentation event together, which was lovely. But so I know she's sometimes had difficulties. And I just wondered if you got any guidance on that, really.
I forgot what the question was.
Well, I mean, first of all, it sounds like you handled it really well. So, so you know, I mean, there isn't, the guidance is to kind of, you know, be human, really. And I think the first guidance is to do you have a volunteer agreement? Or
well, only informally, really.
I mean, I think I would advise an actual written volunteer agreement, and it doesn't have to be like, it doesn't have to be like scary legalese.
No.
You know, it can be kind of like a sort of plain English, and it can be kind of quite gentle, and it can basically be almost like you can combine it like with the role description. That's probably the best way to do it, to sort of combine it with the here's what we expect from you as a volunteer, and here's what you can expect from us when you volunteer with us, and then here's what will happen if it doesn't go wrong, or like here's what we'll agree if it doesn't work out, really. And then that gives you the sort of the kind of emergency cord, really, if somebody actually didn't want to go, even after you'd gently had those conversations with them in the way that you've just described, because you do actually sometimes get a volunteer who, even after you've had those conversations with them, they sort of go, well, no, you recruited me as a volunteer, I'm coming as a volunteer, you recruited me as a volunteer, you can't do that to me. So if you have got something written in place that actually you can show them, that you can say, actually, when we recruited you as a volunteer, we mutually had this agreement that says that you are a volunteer so long as we hold up our end of the bargain and you hold up your end of the bargain, but you're not holding up your end of the bargain because you're not behaving in the way that we expect you to behave to represent our organisation. And so I think that having a volunteer agreement in place does give you that bit of security. But I think in terms of like having the conversation with somebody, I think it sounds like you handled it really, really well, and actually, even though it's uncomfortable, I think you had the best outcome.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I do think I can see the benefit of a volunteer agreement, just as a basic, you know, these are our core values and we expect you to treat people with respect and all of those kind of things. So yeah,
or like Teresa's saying, like a code of conduct. So you can have like a code of conduct for volunteers. You can combine the code of conduct into that. You can do it at different levels. It just gives you something that ultimately you can call on if somebody then is very resistant to saying, you can't stop me coming and doing this because, you know, I am insistent that I'm within my rights to come and do this.
Yeah, okay, thank you. We just hope everything goes smoothly again, really.
Well, like 99.99999%.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have lots of volunteers and they're generally wonderful. So yeah, okay, thank you, Laura.
I think there was somebody else.
Joanne and Teresa have got their hands up.
So there was Lynette asked about languages for printed materials for volunteers as well. And I think, that probably, varies based on, like, if you can ask your local authority for, like, your demographic data. So you can normally ask your local authority, or you can get the census data and just see what the populations are, and then that should give you an indication for what might be the most popular languages to do some translation into. And then it just depends, what you're maybe doing recruiting for.
Teresa, have you still got a question?
I do, yes. I don't know if it's relevant for here or not. I don't know if you're sort of doing any training around applying for funding, because I've got a group of people who've got hoarding issues, and really they could do with starting small, but having something like a part-time paid member of staff, as well as some volunteers to help to run a support group, because obviously they've got so much on their minds. So they need a little bit of help with some funding from the co-op, and maybe sort of having a repair shop, because quite often they say they need to fix things, to find a space that they can have to do a repair shop and they can fix their things. But I don't know if you sort of do any training around actually applying for some funding, and whether that would be relevant.
So where are you based, Teresa?
I'm in the West Midlands, in Sandwell.
So we're Oxfordshire. I mean, we do quite often, like, I don't think I've got we've actually today we had a training course on today on writing your fundraising strategy for small organizations. It was open to, like, you didn't have to be from Oxfordshire to register on it. But Sandwell have got an amazing CVS, so that they've probably got some stuff on as well. But the hoarding thing, we've got a fund in Oxfordshire at the moment to do with combating sort of it's called the Connected Communities Fund, and the money's come via adult social care. And actually we had an application to do with hoarding, and the team that were looking at the applications were like, oh, well, this has nothing to do with adult social care. And I was like, wait,
Yeah.
wait, I think it is. Let's look at it again, because actually, having been a counsellor for like 8 years, I'm kind of a bit obsessed with people that have hoarding issues, because it kind of, I've kind of witnessed it a lot, and I've seen a lot of people be kind of on the edge of being evicted from their housing and things because they've got hoarding issues, and so I'm quite interested in that area. So I think go for it, get that funding from somewhere, because I think that's a really important topic. And so I was kind of like, I was like, no, go back and give them some guidance on how to kind of redo that proposal a little bit, and make sure that they get the funding, because so yeah, I'm hoping that this project in Oxfordshire does get funded, because I think that we do need something around supporting people. I think that when we know about people that are hoarding, I think it's massively helpful to, like, our adult social care team and stuff like that, to have somewhere that we can refer them to get help with that.
It's difficult because they're all very isolated, and I think it's all very well sorting one person out at a time. But I think if people get together as into groups or support groups, they can share ideas. As the cooperative idea is a brilliant idea. So if they could sort of get together and start working in smaller groups, and then it might become bigger. But definitely there's no understanding by even GPs, so they haven't got a starting point really. So any training you provide is absolutely brilliant.
Teresa, I don't know if you can see it on the device that you're using, but Debbie's put in the link for the community fund to apply for funding, and also I'll hand over to Connor in a minute because we've got another session coming up about applying for funding. So I'll hand over to Connor in a sec and he can just quickly talk you through. But yeah, Debbie's put a link in the chat, or if you want to type in your email address, if you're happy to share your email address, we could send you a separate email after the session with the link and that in there for you.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Connor, can I just hand over to you for 2 seconds and just to just give a little brief on that conversation that we're doing in Feb?
Absolutely. I hope everyone can hear me okay. On the 15th of Feb from 2 to 3 p.m, we'll have a co-op conversation around tips for applying to funding. This will be with a guest speaker as well, Kate Beale, who's got a CEO of her own organization, and she gets funding in this tens of thousands to even hundreds of thousands range. So she's got a wealth of experience in applying to a range of funds. So yeah, really be great to have you there. I'll be doing a bit of talking as well, and again, it'll be recorded. So if you can't make it at that time, don't worry, it will be online afterwards as well. And yeah, the link is to a £500 grant as well that we do, and it's very, very open. So anyone else on this call, if you're looking for a quick source of money for your group, we definitely advise applying to our fund. It's very open, quick application, and yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Connor, how can people book onto the session? Can we put a link up, or can we send it out with the evaluation, the link to book on?
So we don't have the actual link just yet for the 15th, but what we will do is send out the invite, and then I think a week before or so of the event is when we send the actual link out. So yeah, we can forward the email to everyone here. That's no problem.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Thanks, Connor.
we've only just knuckled down the actual timing of the event and that. So once all the link and is sorted, we can definitely just send out the link to the booking site to everybody that's on this call tonight. I mean,
Brilliant.
it will go out to members anyway, but we'll send it separately to everybody that's kindly logged on today for us.
Thanks, Karen. Does anybody else have any more questions or comments?
It's not a question, but what I was going to say at some point on this session as well was I'm sort of happy to announce for anyone specifically in the Chipping Norton area that we're going to be piloting a project that is basically rewarding young people from the ages of 16 to 25 for doing volunteering in the local area. Actually, no, it's not Chipping Norton, it's Morton in Gloucester. I always get the two confused, but yes. If between 16 and 25-year-olds, we're basically offering discounts off in our store for every hour of volunteering you do. Something will go out about it probably in March. It's only just been decided today that we're definitely going to pilot that, but that's in conjunction with our Young Cooperators Network, so YCN. So you'll see some stuff on social media at some point. Aisha in the school, she runs that. So if you've got any groups that you're part of with 16 to 25-year-olds that you think might want to do some volunteering but need a bit of a nudge in the right direction, then we'll be partnering with Cotswolds Friends. That's just across the road from our Morton store. And yeah, I'm really happy to be doing it because it's an idea I had last year, and there's a lot of young people out there who maybe want to get involved, but maybe they want to go along with a friend or they're not sure where to go. And sometimes just a little bit of an incentive, it means that if the community is going to be better off for it, then we're happy to provide that. So just a pilot for 4 months, see how it goes. But yeah, if you're local to Morton on the Marsh, then yeah, tell everyone you know about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Connor. Any other questions from anyone? So we will send out a quick email to you all tomorrow from Karen and myself to do a quick sum up and evaluation, and we'll add the various links in that you've heard about today. If they're available, the grant link we'll put on as well for you tomorrow. So please look out for that email. That will come from your co-op email address tomorrow. And I think you'll all join me in thanking Laura for a really informative session. We adore Laura. She's really, really fabulous. So thank you, Laura, so much for giving up your time. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight on this cold winter's night. And I hope you found the session really worthwhile.
Yeah, we really appreciate you taking the time to come out today. And as Lou said, the feedback, we'd be really grateful if you wouldn't mind just spending 2 minutes. It's not a great big feedback form. It's just a few questions, because we really sort of appreciate any feedback that we can get from you guys. So we'd be really grateful if you wouldn't mind just spending 2 minutes to reply to that email that we'll send out tomorrow. But unless anybody's got any other questions, again, I'd personally like to thank Laura as well for tonight. I think it's brilliant. It's been a really good session. And just wish you all a very good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.